Okay, so welcome everyone. Welcome to our second part of our third curriculum module. And for those of you who missed the first part, I hope you had a chance to go back and take a look at it, as it really built a solid base for what's to come today. And just a quick reminder that during today's Q&A, if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, please just click on the hand raising icon on the GoToWebinar control panel. Or alternatively, if you'd like to type your question or comment, then go ahead and do so using the question box, which is also located on the control panel. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over to Efrain, as I know he has a lot to get to today. And in the interest of time, I'd like to get to a lot of Q&A at the end as well. So let's go ahead and start today's presentation. And Efrain, I'm going to go ahead and give you the mic.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this second session. I'm really excited to be with you again, or with some of you for the first time if you weren't able to join us for the first webinar. As I did during our first webinar, I want to start with two things. I want to recognize the native folks, the native nations that have been living and thriving in the land that we now inhabit. The Duwamish tribe, for example, here in Seattle, among other nations in the Seattle region, the Cherokee Nation in Tennessee. One of our speakers is going to be speaking from Tennessee. And then the Pueblo Nation, the Navajo Nation in New Mexico, with a rich story of Native Americans. I just wanted to bring that. They're still fighting for their rights, and it's important to bring their spirit to the conversation. And the second thing is the hard work. The second thing I want to bring up is the hard work and el esfuerzo, echarle ganas of our parents, our moms, our dads, our abuelas, abuelos, that have worked so hard for us to be able to be here today. I want us to model that leadership that they had and just bring it to the conversation. So I want to start acknowledging those things. And keep that as we continue with the webinar. So this webinar, I wanted to make it really conversational. So I really hope you guys feel like you can jump in, or you all feel like you can jump in with questions. We have a really good panel today. Let me make a quick introduction. I'm Efrain Gutierrez. I'm with FSG. FSG is a nonprofit consulting firm that does strategy, evaluation, and research work. We work closely with different partners to increase their social impact. I particularly work in the evaluation area, and we do a lot of work in collective impact efforts. That's why I was able to have a conversation. I wanted to have a conversation with you on collective impact last time, and I have also had the opportunity to evaluate collective impact efforts the last few years. And today we're going to be reflecting on the leadership required for collective impact. So I'm excited about introducing Jennifer Gomez Chavez, who is the director of the Unidos project in New Mexico, and also we have also Mauricio Calvo, who is the executive director of Latino Memphis. They're going to be speaking in a few minutes. I just want to make some intro remarks. And then also, I want to be grateful and thankful to Alexis Alvarez Franco, associate at FSG, that is also going to be helping us today during the Q&A. So I'm going to start with some framing slides, and then from there, I want to make sure that we have enough time to hear from our guests, and that we have also a lot of time for Q&A. So let's move on. I don't want to bring back all the different theory that we discussed last time. It was a lot of theory, but I do want to just remind us what collective impact is. So collective impact is a structured process that brings different sectors, people from different sectors together to address complex problems, right? It's a commitment of a group of folks, a group of organizations that are coming from different sectors, from government, that are coming from nonprofit sector, that might be coming from businesses, and that come together to identify what's the problem that we want to solve and what's the way in which we are going to come together to solve it. So With that said, I want to make sure that during our conversation today, we don't limit ourselves to discuss the leadership skills and some of the things that you need to look at when you're thinking about leadership in collective impact. I think we should broaden the concept and just think about what do you need to do in order to be a successful leader when you're collaborating. I think the world that we live in, the problems that philanthropy particularly is trying to solve are really complex, and it's necessary to do a lot of collaboration, and that collaboration and that systems thinking that it's like a buzzword right now in the field, this idea that you need to think about the context and the connections between different organizations in order to solve a problem. So given that that's happening in the field, I want to broaden what the conversation is going to be about, to not only think about collective impact, but think about collective impact as just a frame for collaboration, but either just in collaboration in general, what are some of the characteristics that leaders need to have and that we need to have? So I want to start with an example of the work that I've been able to do with here at FSG, evaluating the Latino Student Success Initiative. This was an initiative that Lumina Foundation started in 2011, where 13 sites from all over the country, you can see the different sites on your screen, came together to increase Latino student success in their communities, using collective impact as a lens. Many of the efforts used the framework of collective impact differently, but over three and a half years, we were the national evaluators for the effort, and we were able to observe how the sites were implementing their collective impact efforts. And as part of that, during the last year, I wanted to make sure that the voices and the expertise that was developed during those 3 years of implementation of the efforts was not lost. So what we did as part of the final part of our evaluation is ask the different leaders from the different 13 efforts, including, not when I mention leaders, I talk about the leaders of the backbone organizations, but I'm also talking about parents, students. I'm talking about the leaders of the different organizations coming to the collaboratives. We did a bunch of interviews, and as part of the interviews, we asked them about what are some of the characteristics, what are some of the things that are required to do this work right, the essential ingredients for success, if you want to call it some way. And we ended up with a set of principles, a set of recommendations that these group of folks wanted to put out to the field and say, if you want to do Latino student success work using a collective impact framework, if you want to do place-based work in collaboration in support of Latino student success, these are the things that you need to keep in mind. And as part of that, I wanted to bring two things. I wanted to include some of the principles here because I think they speak about some of the things that can make a leader successful in collaboration. And I also wanted to bring two of the leaders of those efforts, and those are our guests today are going to be speaking about two of the efforts, the one in New Mexico and the one in Memphis. So the first thing, let me start with this is one of the principles that we developed. The idea was, and that I want to put forward for the group, is approaching the communities you serve with a positive asset lens. Something that was really clear for everyone working in the Latino Student Success effort is that in order to for leaders to be able to inspire and to move forward in community, you need to be looking at the strengths and the assets and resources that the community brings. I'm not going to read this whole thing for you. That's why you have it on the slide. But I do want to mention a couple of examples of how some of the sites and some of the leaders in the sites brought this asset-based lens to the work. For example, some sites started to reframe the achievement gap in education. For those working in education, you know that there is a lot of conversation around the achievement gap between, in this case, Latino students and white students, and they reframe it as the opportunity gap, to start thinking not about the fact that these students were not achieving, but about the fact that these students had potential, and start imagining what would happen if these kids where, like, if this gap didn't exist and all of our students were thriving in universities. So it also represented in the sites in the South, they also apply this asset-based lens when trying to create a sense of urgency for Latino student success. And the way to talk about it is talking about Latino students representing an opportunity and a resource for untapped potential. Not saying, like, you know, like, particularly in the South, Latino communities are really nascent. They're very, like, they're new in many ways. The communities are still learning how to support Latino communities in the region, and they were using this asset base, saying, hey, there are a lot of Latino students coming into your education system. They have they represent a great opportunity and a source of potential for the school system, and also for universities that are gonna be serving those students. So that's the first one. The second one is ensuring that beneficiaries are involved in the decision-making process. I mean, this is not rocket science, but it was important for the folks working in the Latino success effort that leaders understand that it's important to involve the voices and the experiences of people with lived experience in the work. For example, one of the sites had a student representative sitting on the leadership team of the Latino student success effort. This was the one in Kentucky, I think. And the idea here is that if you do that, you need to be really thoughtful as a leader in terms of how to bring those folks to the table. And one, do it in a way that is respectful of what they can bring. And two, that they feel comfortable and they feel equipped to come to the table and contribute. So not just bring a kid to the meeting, but make sure that the kid is able to get there with transportation, that you're supporting the student with, if they need a stipend, they're giving up their time. So if needed, a stipend. If these students have kids, childcare, so they can come to the table, just make it easier for them to come. And also make sure that they feel supported in terms of participating in that table. Make sure that you prep them with the necessary just like context, and also that they feel like they can contribute to the work. So that's just one example of how leaders need to be thinking about bringing those voices, but bringing those voices in a way that honors the ability of people with lived experience to come to the table fully. And then the third one that I want to bring, and this is my favorite one, is this concept of cultivating confianza. And I like doing this in Latino or Latinx audiences because the concept of confianza, if you think about it, I don't know for you, but for me, it translates as trust, but it's really a lot more than trust. Like, I think having confianza is not only the ability of partners to trust each other, but it's actually knowing and knowing each other personally and trusting each other and respecting each other as people, not just as professionals. And I think this was something really important that leaders need to bring to the table. They need to generate this confianza, maybe by bringing different opportunities for folks to get together and get to know each other as people. I remember in Miami, they would have a happy hour after having their meetings, of the steering committee meetings or some of the meetings. They would say, you know what, after the meeting, we're having this happy hour. We're going to talk to each other, get to know each other better. I know the same thing was happening in New York, where they were doing, well, not the same thing, but similarly, they were meeting earlier. And before the meeting, they will have 30 minutes just to connect and network. So the importance of bringing this concept of confianza was something that resonated well with Latino student success effort leaders and partners. And the last one that I'm gonna offer today is the idea of treating your partners as familia. So when you're working in collective impact, there are a lot of organizations with a lot of different interests coming together. So if you're doing this type of collaboration, it's really important that you honor the fact that there are many organizations represented and that there is not one organization that takes the win, right? So in this case, the Latino Student Success, in this case, some of the sites, some examples of what the sites did is, instead of having just one logo for the effort, they put all the logos for all the different organizations on the different materials for the work. So it's in those small things, or whenever they were mentioning something good that was happening as part of the effort, they would mention all the different organizations. They will make sure in being really intentional to mention all the different organizations that were participating in the effort. When you think of yourself as leaders in a collaborative effort, you need to make sure that everybody feels honored and everybody feels like they're being recognized for the work they did. I think that was something that was really important for the Latino student success efforts to be successful. So these are just some of the principles. I'm happy to chat more about these evaluation. It was a very interesting experience. And I'm glad that I was able to share some of this with you. Happy to answer any questions after the Q&A. But now I'm going to turn it, let me go back. I'm going to turn it to Jennifer Gomez Chavez. I'm going to let her introduce herself. She's the director of the Unidos project in New Mexico. I had the honor and opportunity, like the great opportunity to visit her a couple of years ago when we were doing the evaluation and see the great work that they are doing in New Mexico. They have a very interesting their strategy is really interesting. It's related to the acequia system, which is a water system that is like very unique and special in New Mexico. So I would leave it there. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. Are you there, Jennifer?
Sorry about it. I had y'all on mute. Buenas tardes. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Buenas tardes, everyone. And it is such an honor and pleasure to be with you this afternoon to share the efforts of our Latino Student Success project that we embarked on beginning in 2011 here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Our goal here in New Mexico, because we are a very diverse state, just to give you kind of a quick background, we are 48% Hispanic Latino population. We are home to 22 Native American communities. And again, we are considered one of the most diverse states in the nation. But our challenges continue to be gaps within our student achievement, and how do we come together as a community to address those? And so having the Unidos project begin in 2011 with educational institutions, which included Albuquerque Public School System. It's the largest public school system in the state. The University of New Mexico, which is our flagship research institution here in New Mexico, and Central New Mexico Community College, which is also our two-year institution that helps to provide educational experiences from dual credit to, helping our community members achieve associate degrees and certifications. So what was unique about the Unidos project is that it wasn't just educational institutions coming together, but in fact, community organizations were identified as an asset to this work. I think oftentimes educational institutions believe that we have all the answers. And in fact, some of the greatest ideas come from best practices out in communities, within organizations that are doing grassroots work and working with our families and students. And so it was key for us to include many different organizations as well as policy. Our focus wasn't just to, think about providing direct services, but how could we go in and change systems that were hindering the progress of students? And so, we have also a policy component where we invited key legislators, both leaders in the state as well as nationally, to provide guidance and help us begin to change those environments, those policies, to make those systems and those pathways for the families here. So the university was the backbone organization, and it still is the backbone organization for this effort. And we were able to get more than 75 community organizations, which include businesses, community organizations, different entities, different entities, to come together and figure out how we can increase Latino student success. We developed 4 different strategies, and I won't get into all those strategies, but if you, as you heard Efrain earlier, one of the first things that we felt was important was to develop that in New Mexico, our students and families could be familiar and recognize, and that was our acequia model. Water is really, really critical to our state and to many of our communities. And we felt like our students and families are precious assets in our community. And so we developed this beautiful metaphor, the acequia model, in where we developed the different strategies. And those strategies continue to lead us in our work. And they include abriendo la compuerta, opening the gate. We want to get as many students into the educational pipeline, all the way from K through, P through 20. So we want to ensure that students are flowing through our efforts, through the pathways to reach educational success. So getting them in the door, providing them opportunities was key. The second one is increasing the flow. How do we keep students and families engaged? Aumentando la corriente, increasing the flow is critical, right? And keeping everybody engaged and along the pathway through different strategies. The third one was recuperando la corriente, reclaiming the flow. So students who have dropped out or stopped out, how do we get them back in the flow, back in the pathway to reach their educational goals? And then we have La Limpia. La Limpia is really important in the acequia model, and that's removing any barriers that keep the flow of water going through. And so for us, it's identifying and removing all those institutional barriers that perpetuate disparities through inequity, exclusion, and institutional racism. So, as I talked a little bit about, we provide some direct services, and then we also focus on institutional changes. So the structure of Unidos is made up of, 4 different strategy groups, and each strategy group is represented by individuals that are assigned by their institution, whether it's an organization or educational institution. We come together and work on specific strategies. And then we also have an Unidos Council, and the Unidos Council provides leadership. It is the leaders within the different entities who can make quick decisions and help us change those systems. I want to move now, because I know this is sharing what we've learned. And as a leader, what we can tell you is, with the Unidos Project in particular, is that this effort created excitement. As I told you before, we are majority minority. The Latinos here are actually, pretty much the majority, but what we definitely want, what we built on with Unidos is a common effort. It helped us bring work across institutions. Many times we're working across silos. We also heightened how we value our community organizations, that in fact their feedback and the work that they're doing is valued and considered. Okay, the challenges that we encountered that we encountered were that there were other similar projects starting up after Unidos had started, and so that led to some competition and I think some confusion. And I think it also led to overcommitment of individuals, right? They were being overtaxed. They were part of another initiative and also part of ours. So trying to balance their time and energy. And then another challenge that we, I think in this financial climate, I'm not sure those of y'all who are out there might understand. I know, nationally, the climate is not all that positive right now. And I can tell you in the state of New Mexico, we depend a lot on our gas and oil production, and so right now we are in a crisis. And what has happened is that our budgets are in crisis. To see a decline in our budgets across institutions. So how do we keep the momentum going, right? And then, I want to, encourage anybody who is out there looking for opportunities to fund other models in other communities is to just really understand the cultural context of the specific populations that you're working with. Don't be afraid to ask for those of us who have been working in this effort, and think about community organizations as being as assets to the work. So our model, and we are sharing our community-based model, which is a brief that we published with Excelencia in Education for you to review. So I'll take questions later on, and thank you for letting me share a little bit about the work that Unidos has been doing.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for bringing all the experience from your work. Now I'm going to turn us to Mauricio Calvo, the Executive Director of Latino Memphis, another site that I was able to visit during the evaluation of the Latino Student Success effort and see the great work that Mauricio is doing, not only as part of the Latino Student Success effort, but just in general representing the Latino community in Memphis. So I'll turn it to you, Mauricio, to make an introduction and just give us some of your knowledge.
Gracias, Efraín. Gracias, Jennifer. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, I hope so. Great. All right, well, thank you again. And like Efraín said, this is amazing to be part of this familia, and we are in confianza. I love his definition of confianza. So a little bit of background about how the Latino Student Success Initiative play here in Memphis. We work primarily in three different aspects, and let me just give you a little bit of context. As you can imagine, Memphis is one of those sites that had an emerging Latino community. So unlike New Mexico or New York or San Antonio, the number of Latinos in the city of Memphis is relatively small compared to the larger population. Nevertheless, it's a number that continues to grow. So today, about 8 to 9% of the entire population in the city of Memphis is Latino or Latino descent. So our work was focused in three particular areas, and those were programmatic, collaborative work, and policy work. So only 17, so less than 20% of Latinos in the state of Tennessee have a college degree. But I want to do what Efraín just reminded us to do and put this on a positive spin. We have the opportunity to create 83% of the 83% is the opportunity gap for Latinos if we one day want to get to 100% of Latinos with a college degree. But that was not the goal. The goal is to get to 60% at the state of Tennessee. In the state of Tennessee, Governor Haslam has something called Drive to 55, and it will be amazing to one day be able to move from 17 to 55. So on our Latino Student Success, we work in these three areas. We gather a collaborative around programmatic work, as I mentioned earlier. Unlike Jennifer's work that it was based at a college or university, we are a nonprofit. So we were working with high school students to get them to college. We recognize that unless we get Latinos to graduate and to be ready to college, the number of Latinos graduating from college was not going to be enough. We knew that just getting them through the door was not going to be enough, but that had to be our number one task. So we started working with mentoring, with a very heavy and aggressive approach to, and when I said aggressive in a positive way, of course, working with high school students in one high school in particularly, and then we grew up to 2 to 3 to 5 different high schools, again, working with students on a weekly basis. But we knew that we could not do this work alone. So at the same time, we were looking at a collaborative. So how do we impact this at the institutional level? And this is really where the collective impact framework came to place. We recognized that we needed philanthropy, and we needed other nonprofits, we needed the school systems and others to help us move the needle in this important work. And I'll talk about that in a second. And so we created this collaborative. And finally, we recognized, as many of you, and perhaps this is true in every single one of our communities, that there were policies in place that were preventing or continue to prevent students from reaching those goals. So no matter how good of a job we were doing at the programmatic work, or how strong our collaborative was, unless we were able to change those policies, that was not going to change. And we feel that leveraging the power of the collaborative was going to help us move the policy work as well. Efrain asked us to talk to you about some of the challenges, some of the opportunities. I am going to start with the challenges, not because because I want to finish on a positive note. I tell you what happened in our case. The Tennessee Higher Education Commission, which is based in Nashville. For those of you outside of Tennessee, this is about 3 hours away from Memphis. This is the statewide government organization that is regulating colleges and universities, or was at the time, across the state. So the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, wow, that sounds like a big thing for a small nonprofit in Memphis, and it is a big thing. So they reached out to us because they had identified this opportunity through Lumina, but they needed, this is a love collective impact, because they needed to have, in order to apply for a grant, they needed to have a collaborative work, and they needed to have a community-based partner. So they reached out to us, and so we started working. They were the backbone of the organization, of the collaborative. They were the fiscal agent as well. So some of the challenges that happened were the cultural differences between both organizations. And I wanted to make the distinction. There were primarily two challenges within the cultural space. The fact that we were Latinos and they were not, and that were, of course, a lot of challenges, but also the idea that they were a big established government-run organization and we were a nonprofit, and those were like very different ways of doing that. So even though they were the backbone of the organization, from day one, they took us very serious, but it was good, but it was challenging. Another challenge that we had was place. They were in Nashville and we were in Memphis, and this particular initiative started in just Memphis, and we designed it that way to be more effective. So the distance, the fact that they were not here, that was a challenge as well. When we gathered the collaborative around this framework, we had a lot of people interested at the beginning to come to the table, because who is not going to be interested in increasing the number of Latinos to go to college? So even for PR purposes, it looked really good. So a lot of people joined the table, but as time went on and the work got a little harder and harder, it got a little bit more challenging. And I would say that the biggest challenge is the level of relevancy is different for different organizations. So THEC was completely committed to this work because they were the fiscal agent, because they were the backbone, because they really wanted to see the number of Latinos in Tennessee going up. And so it was our goal. But some of the other partners were not as interested. They came to the first meeting, to the third meeting, and they would come and go. So that was a challenge. Also the funding was interesting. Most of the funding went to the state and to Latino Memphis. So some of those partners that were not getting paid and they were not, this was not part of their mission, was a little bit more challenging. So I'll leave those three things as challenges: the culture, the place, and the relevancy. But let me move into the positive things. One thing that this did, being able to partner with somebody like THEC, it brought a lot of exposure to the issue, because it was no longer a small nonprofit in the west part of Tennessee bringing this issue up. All of a sudden, it was the Tennessee Higher Education Commission saying this is important. So it gave us a tremendous leverage to raise the issue of Latino student success, not only in Memphis, but across the state. So when we called partners, we were saying, hey, we are the Latino Student Success, an initiative of THEC, and in partnership with the Lumina Foundation. All of a sudden, people started opening their doors. So that was amazing. The backbone, the number two thing that really helped us on this opportunity, again, the intentionality of THEC to transfer the backbone structure to Latino Memphis at the end of the 3-year grant. And I would have to say Troy Grant, who's the director of college access for THEC, was very intentional from day one. He said, look, at the end of the day, this is your work. We're not Latinos. We're not in Memphis, everything that I just told you. And we're going to be here to support you. But Latino Memphis has to have the capacity to carry this work beyond the 3-year initial grant. And they did. I will tell you today that a few years into this work, Latino Memphis has grown from 6 to 20 employees. And not only around education, we have increased our legal department, our marketing department, and others. In general, our capacity has grown thanks to the work of this initial capacity building grant. And on the policy work, we have not been successful in achieving tuition equality for the entire state for undocumented students, but this is an issue that has come up on a bill sponsored by a white Republican in a suburb in Memphis every single year. So Maria Hinojosa from NPR made a story saying that Mark White is the only Republican in the South that is brave enough to support and to sponsor this bill. We're not going to get political on this, but I think it's important to see how people from both sides of the aisle are seeing this as an opportunity. So we see that even though we have not been able to accomplish it, every year we get closer to make this a reality. But the most amazing, I think, takeaway from this, it didn't happen at the policy level, but it happened at the institutional level. Christian Brothers University, CBU, is a local university here in Memphis, and they have increased the number of Latinos in their enrollment from about 3% to almost about 20% for the incoming freshman class. And I will be excited to tell you that the majority of these students are dreamers, are DACA holders. So the commitment of this university, the commitment of philanthropy, and the work of the collaborative completely paid off 6 years later to a level that we had no idea it was gonna reach. So I'll stop right there. Be more than happy to take questions in the Q&A, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Mauricio. Thank you, and I like that approach of starting with some of the challenges and then leave with a really amazing and positive note around the university and their engagement and the way they're working with Latinos. So here you have it, folks. You have one collective impact effort that is hosted at a university setting in New Mexico, bringing different partners together. And then you have this other effort in Memphis where a governmental institution and a nonprofit come together to create a little bit of a dual, just like leadership and transition process, where Latino Memphis became the backbone organization at the end of the 3 years of the grant. So I want to give you time to ask us questions. We have around 20 minutes. So if you want to do it either over the phone, Michael, I hope the phones are, if you can unmute the phones, or you raise your hand and Michael can unmute it, or you can do it over just the question on the panel, on the little like GoToWebinar thingy. I don't see any hands raised or anyone talking over the phone. We have some questions.
If you would like,
Alexis, yes, Alexis, yeah. Go ahead. I volunteered Alexis to help us with some questions.
Okay, hi everyone. This is Alexis from FSG. I have a few questions that probably start a discussion, but thank you again to our presenters. Those were some very great examples. And in both examples, there was, as Efrain said, there was a university and then there was nonprofits alliances going on for this collective impact effort. But I kind of wanted to know, what can foundation leaders do to support collective impact efforts, like the ones that you both are a part of? I know Jennifer spoke briefly on it, but I wanted to see if either one of you could elaborate a little bit more.
Thank you.
So, hi, this is Jen, and I can speak to that. Can you hear me? Okay. So, you know, one of the things that when I talk to different organizations or different foundations is that, you know, I think that there are a lot of best practices that are already happening. So how can we invest in things that have shown progress, right? Because I think sometimes, you know, I think the intention is, okay, let's try something new or invest in something that might be seem innovative or, you know, have more of an exciting appeal. But, you know, I do think that there are a lot of best practices out there. And one of the things that we have noticed is that we need to scale up what is working. So for example, in the Unidos project, I mean, you know, we've started some great projects, but don't quite have all the funding, right, to continue to further invest and reach a greater community. So we're one example of multiple projects, I think, out there that if given the opportunity to do that. And then the second, I spoke about this earlier, is, you know, really aligning efforts instead of creating competition. A similar effort was started in our community, and it created a lot of distrust. And so having to go back and build trust has been a work in progress. So I would just say that those are things that, you know, that just to be very careful about as you move forward in investing in different communities.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, if I might, I would love. Yeah, thank you, Efrain. I would love to, you know, really piggyback on. You know, on Jennifer's comment on avoiding duplication. So I came up with 4 things that foundations could or should be doing. Definitely the power of convening. I cannot think of anybody more powerful than a foundation or a philanthropic partner to convene people. When they call, we all show up. So I think that brings a level of seriousness and because everybody's smelling the money. But the number 2 point is that there should be funding for this. I think sometimes foundations have the tendency to support very tangible work, which makes sense. But I think there should be a desire and to fund capacity building for the organizations, but also for the collaborative. Because I mean, this and this has to go beyond paying for lunch or providing coffee or things like that. So through, I mean, really significant investment for capacity building. You know, foundations should love this type of work. It avoids duplication. It increases impact when you bring people together. I remember when we first started this initiative, Lumina, Tina said, make this comment. I don't know if she was just telling us this, if actually it was actually true. She said, when we send the request for proposals, if we got 2 applications from the same city, the city got disqualified. Why? Because that meant people were not talking to each other. How can you believe that there are 2 major players in Memphis, Tennessee, talking about Latino student success, and you guys don't know each other? So avoiding that duplication, I think, is key. But finally, I think it should be a carrot, a carrot with the stick at the end of the game, and said that, for those who stay in the collaborative, we might be having funding alignment. We can apply for fundings together, or there is going to be some reward at the end of the day, or during the process. So I guess it goes back to this is similar, but it's different to the capacity work that I was saying, because the capacity funding should come at the front end, but it should also be the incentive of funding alignment to actually do the work. So avoid duplication, funding alignment, convening, and capacity building.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Any other questions from folks, either around some of the leadership need, like what do you need in leadership, or about the projects? Happy to answer any questions. If not, Alexis has another question for us. Thank you, Alexis.
We actually have a question from Joshua, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute him so he can ask.
Oh, cool.
Great, thanks for all this input. So you mentioned that capacity building for nonprofits goes past the lunch, the food, paying for parking. What are some examples of what that looks like in terms of past the lunch and past all the smaller things? What are some examples of being more thoughtful about the funding around capacity building or convenings?
Thank you. I knew that was going to bite me back. I know. Thank you. Great question. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So, that's a really good example. I mean, for instance, I think the biggest need that nonprofits have is people. So in having a person that really can dedicate time to pull people together, to do the collaborative work, to keep communicating. Just the human resource is basic for this work. I remember when we started the Latino Student Success, there was really, Lumina did put some resources to hire people to help us build the capacity of the collaborative, because otherwise it just becomes a burden on everybody, and what is going to happen, people are going to do just the bare minimum, or just going to work really hard right before the meeting. So if there is a way that foundations can provide funding to support a person, or maybe it's depending on the size of the project, a person that can help, coordinate the efforts. I think that will be key, and that could be an existing employee of one of the partners that just gets additional funding for that. But of course, there is going to be. You mentioned some of those. There's going to be a need for training, need for convening. There might be, it just, all of a sudden you start getting all of these expenses that, whether you're doing webinars, you're doing, just really having the capacity to do these things. And for some existing organizations, like a college or university, they might be there for, but some of the smaller partners, it might not be there. So having this initial investment on them may very well depend, may very well be the result, whether they will stay on the collaborative work or they will just fade out after the second meeting.
Hi, this is Jennifer. Let me put my, I'd like to speak to that. And I didn't mention that our biggest strength in Unidos was that we were able to hire a community liaison, somebody who was neutral. wasn't a part of the institution, but was seen as a respected community member, and that person helped us do grassroots effort so that we could build the confianza. So again, as Mauricio has stated, you know, I do think that was the main key that kept us together. We are now in the second phase of the Unidos project. Unfortunately, I am still seen as an employee and administrator at the University of New Mexico, you know, and some community members have a problem with that. And, you know, and so I do think that funding efforts in terms of, maybe, I wouldn't say it would be a requirement, but a suggested, I think, allocation of funds, you know, in some of those investments should be for a community liaison to help in these efforts is so important.
That's great.
Ephraim, I believe you're muted right now.
Well, that's okay. We have another question that's for both Jennifer and Mauricio. So I'll just read that out loud for you all. So it's, how can we also convey the need for long-term funding to our foundations, which seems core to this work?
Jennifer, do you want to go? I'll go. Wow, yeah, that is like the $1 million question. I mean, obviously, I think the word sustainability is the most how do I say it? Not challenging, but yeah, it's the most scary word for many nonprofits. You know, one thing that Lumina did during this Latino Student Success effort that I think at the time came as a very challenging thing, but I think it made sense. And I have used that moving forward with that project and with other projects. So again, we had to do a 3-year, this was a 3-year grant, the investment from Lumina Foundation was. But we were required, I believe, by the end of year 2, to already have aligned some of the funding necessary to continue the work for year 4. And definitely by the end of year 3, we had to have secure money for the following year. It worked great because I mean, different foundations work different ways, but the majority of foundations are not going to want to fund you forever. So again, I know there are exceptions to that, but just kind of knowing that from the beginning and asking foundations to walk alongside with you on this effort, we were able to use Lumina as a reference because we were still doing the work. Foundations didn't feel the pressure that we were desperate for this money, and they saw us as very proactive, something something that typically doesn't happen. So again, in year 2 and definitely in year 3, we were full swing fundraising for year 4 outside of Lumina initial investment. So we were able to continue the work for 3 more years because we were in good shape. I mean, we had money in the bank. Our foundations were happy. Our national foundation was happy for us. So I think I would encourage you to do something similar.
I'll go ahead and speak to that as well. I think it comes down to leadership. And I think that's why it's really important to, as you invest in, you know, efforts, to ensure that the leaders are fully committed. That not just at the beginning they're receiving the funding, but that they're committed to sustain these efforts. And we were fortunate enough to have a vice president for the Division for Equity and Inclusion, Dr. Josie de Leon, here at the University of New Mexico, who really, you know, brought people together. And we also worked on trust, right? A trust across institutions, so that we could have those difficult conversations to see, are there any vacant positions that can be then allocated to this effort once the funding went away, right? So looking at educational institutions, organizations who could maybe, provide positions or funding, I think is important, but I think it has to be leaders in those areas that can make decisions to say, we care about this, this is important, and this is going to be a priority. I think without that, it is difficult, especially right now as I'm talking about financial, the financial climate across institutions here in our state. I mean, we had to be very innovative. So I was, for example, in my role, I was the Director of Student Academic Success for the university. Plus, I was the Executive Director of the Unidos Project. But last year, I was moved to the Division for Equity and Inclusion to look at student success through an equity lens and remaining as the Executive Director of the Unidos Project. So the effort was sustained institutionally. So again, that's just an example of leadership and having and gaining that trust across institutions. There are still some challenges. I'm not saying everything's perfect, but again, how committed are institutions and community organizations? I think for us, I think we needed maybe a couple more years of funding from the Lumina Foundation to kind of finish growing the project and making it a little bit more solid. It takes, what do they say, 5 to 10 years to make some changes within systems and within environments. So I think, on the foundation and looking at if they would fund a little bit more longer in the front end instead of just, 3 years and then you're cut off. Mm-hmm. So that's my interest on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm back. You can hear me now. Perfect. Sorry about that. I was trying to unmute other people's lines and then I mute mine. We have a few minutes. I want to make sure if there is any other question. Otherwise, I want to give our guests just an opportunity for any final comments. But are there any final questions? Seems like we're good. Are there any final comments, Jennifer or Mauricio? You don't have to.
Well, I just want to thank FSG and, and all of you who are on the call for having an interest in this. This is such an important work as we continue to see the demographics increasing, especially in our Latino population. These, I think, will be important conversations to continue to have. And please know that you have me and Mauricio and any other, I think, individuals who are on the ground doing this on a daily basis. You have our support in any way. Thank you.
Yeah, I echo what Jennifer said, and also really to encourage you to take a look at these and other frameworks. I mean, collective impact is not the only framework, but it is a framework that works. Like Efrain said earlier, it's not rocket science, but these 5 steps, I think they're 5, right? They do work, and we have been using them in other situations and scenarios. So I would encourage you to give it a try, to give us feedback, to, like Jennifer said, to call us. We can tell you what has worked for us, what didn't work. And I know Efrain will be sharing our contact information at the end of the webinar. So it is important. Our communities deserve this, no matter in what space you work. I think we have to be professionals about this. We have to be effective. We owe this to our funders. We owe this to our communities. And I think it's important. So thank you, FSG. Thank you, Jennifer. And thanks all of you for taking the time to listen to this webinar.
Excellent. Well, with that, I'm going to leave you. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Thank you so much, Alexis, Jennifer, and Mauricio, for being part of the webinar. I'm just thrilled to be able to organize and participate in these type of activities. This is a very special opportunity that you all have, and I'm just glad that I was able to be part of it. I'm happy to answer any questions. If you want to know more about collective impact, please join the Collective Impact Forum. It's free to join, and there are many resources there. So feel free to just look it up on Google, Collective Impact Forum. We even have a conference every year. It's sold out this year, but you can look up the dates and think about whether this is something that you might want to attend in the future. I think that's it. Michael, are there any final words on your side, or is that it?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo your thanks to both Jennifer and Mauricio, as well as to you, Efrain, and Alexis as well. And just a quick note, I will be disseminating the recording and slide deck for today's webinar, as well as sharing a link to the Excelencia webpage that Jennifer had mentioned. So look out for that. And that site will also provide a copy of the brief, as well as a recording of the national webinar with complete details on the Unidos project. So, and I can also share the web link to the forum as well. So let's keep the discussion rolling on the Wigio board, and please feel free to reach out to any of today's speakers. And until next time, thank you all for joining us.
Gracias.
Gracias. Adiós.
Nos vemos.